Adrian from Audio Excellence, Canada, Philip over there, and Jerry behind the camera. First of all, sorry it's been a while. It's been, what, a month or so since we last did our videos. It's just been very hectic here. All of us have been very, very busy, and so that's the reason why we haven't had a chance to do the videos. You might be interested to know that yesterday I had a very nice Zoom interview with Garth Powell. I think it's Powell, yeah, from AudioQuest. He's the chief designer, chief engineer at AudioQuest, and it was a great conversation I had with him. It turned out to be almost 2 hours, so we'll break it into probably 2 separate parts. Jerry's going to work on it, and we'll release it as soon as he's done. Anyway, good to see all of you again, at least virtually, and hope you're all doing well. So the irony is that now that we're back, we're in lockdown mode again.
Well, this is why we have time to do this.
Yeah, so as of, when was it officially? Today's Friday.
Yesterday.
As of yesterday?
Yeah.
Yesterday was the first day where
12:01 a.m.
Ontario officially went into more severe lockdown than
And we were
previously.
already in the 4-week break or emergency break, and now they basically shut everything down again. But
Yeah, so now it's back to curbside pickups. All the restaurants are strictly takeouts only. No more sit-ins. Poor things. I have no idea how they survive. It's just a terrible situation.
well, if you think about it, really, the restaurants. I mean, I live up in Stouffville, and there's a really fancy steakhouse there, and it's been outside patio for a year, and I've never seen anybody there. I don't know how they survive.
Yeah, so it's, and I mean so on the one hand, you can take out certain things like pizza, right? It won't make that much of a difference. But if you're eating a nice meal, it's a lot different sitting down, enjoying company, than taking it out, arriving. Like imagine if you had a restaurant that's French cuisine.
Oh,
How do you do takeout of French cuisine? Because a large part of what you're also doing is the experience of looking at the plating,
of
right?
course.
How beautiful it comes out. And then you get it in Tupperware.
Well, fortunately, we're Chinese, so it doesn't really matter. Our food is quite adaptable. And you know what? The only meal I've ever had in this time period from a year ago is the time we took Jay out for his.
Oh, Kanji Queen.
That's it.
Really?
That's the only time I've gone out for food.
You haven't gone?
I've gone to like takeouts and stuff like that, but that's just for myself. I haven't really, sat down with someone to eat.
Every time Ontario has allowed the restaurants to have eat-in, I will go out of my way to visit the restaurants that I like, to try and support them, support the wait staff. And also the food just seems to be better. I just enjoy it better. Takeout just doesn't. So I love this particular meal. It's braised noodles, braised beef in noodle soup. It's wonderful. Oh my God, I'm starting to salivate. It's spicy. It's wonderful. I buy for the guys. But when you get it, takeout, the noodles are in a container and the soup's in another container. When you get it back, the noodles are all dry, and then you put the soup into the noodles. The noodles are all like tangled up and hard. They don't taste the same. And so even something as simple as that just doesn't do it for me.
Fortunately, audio equipment doesn't suffer the same consequences.
Yeah. So let's get back to this. Sorry, you can fast forward. I'll ask Jerry to put timestamps on it. So we decided to do a couple of topics. Today, right now, we're going to do how to choose speakers. So again, because a lot of the emails that I see are questions about speakers, Magnepan LRSs, how do I choose the amplifier for it? What do you think of the speakers? What do you think of, in fact, I think the last topic that we did was, again, a question sort of around speakers. How do you like Focals versus B&Ws versus Magicals versus et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, well, let's cover something as simple as, how to choose speakers, the 10,000 foot sort of view. So, Philip, why don't we start with something that simple? Somebody comes to you and says, I want to upgrade. I want to start with speakers first.
That's a really complicated question.
We have 20 minutes.
Obviously, we prefer some sort of synergistic approach.
Yeah.
But that only can happen if you have the experience to do so, which is why visiting something like a brick and mortar store like ourselves is a really good first step, especially if you have no idea about what's going on. So I'll tell you a story. Back in the day, when I was very young, and I would read voraciously anything I could get my hands on concerning audio, including, speakers and whatnot. Now, back then, there was some journalistic integrity, theoretically, right? In other words, it wasn't just anybody posting views and viewpoints on the internet, on YouTube, like we're doing, but so it would all be published. It would be vetted by, an editor and fact checkers and whatnot. So I did read a lot about everything I could get my hands on, including what would be good speakers. So that's how I started. And I suppose it can be sort of done the same way. You need to start somewhere. I don't care where it is, but you need to have a viewpoint. You can't just be like, oh, I don't know, choose for me. You have to think about the kind of sound that you like, and then you have to try and gravitate towards that. So there is, I mean, as far as I tell people, my clients and my potential clients, there is no real wrong choice, but you must start somewhere. How do you know if you don't like something if you don't try it? Or how do you know if you like something if you don't try it? So in our store, we try to have a number of different things that all sound good, but your preference will dictate what you buy. So you have to start somewhere. Choose a perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. When I was thinking about this topic, I thought about it strategically. So many years ago, I was fortunate enough to learn about this particular business trainer, and he's passed away now, unfortunately. But he talked about and stressed the importance of strategy versus tactics. Um, so, for example, he would give the idea about going to war. You know, tactics would be like you have how many guns and how many bombs and planes and things like this. The strategy is the big picture. How do you want to uh, um, run the war so that the end result is precisely what you would like? So, in other words, big picture first, and then think about all the little things that you can deal with to execute. So, the big picture is when it comes to speakers for me is why do you want to change? What makes you think that speakers would be the choice? So, that's the first question you want to ask yourself. Why do you think it's the speakers? And then, assuming that you can answer that, then what don't you like about your speakers? Assuming, again, you're not the first time buyer and you actually own something, what don't you like about your speakers? Because as Villa pointed out very well, you have to have a point of view. So if you own a pair of speakers that you obviously like because you bought it, then what's changed? What don't you like about it now? Or what would you like to improve? If you like what you have, what else would you like to improve about it? And that will at least help you towards the next step so you don't make unnecessary mistakes that both Philip and I have made multiple times.
Multiple
Yeah,
times.
multiple times, And another question that you can ask is, did you hear something either at a friend's house or at a store, whatever it is that made you want to upgrade? And if so, what was that thing or things that compelled you to want to change? So as an example, let's say it was sound staging. You never heard sound staging before in your life, like way back in the 80s when I first heard this concept of sound staging and imaging. It blew my mind. And I pursued that relentlessly for quite a few years to the detriment of everything else.
Yeah, so my story goes, it's really simple.
Yeah.
The first pair of speakers I ever bought were Boston Acoustic A70s because I had read about this idea of an infinite baffle, and that speaker, the whole Boston Acoustic A series speakers, sort of like that. They're designed to be, they're big and wide, and you place them against the wall to create almost like an infinite baffle. And that to me seemed like a good idea. And then I walked into Ring Audio one day, and Michael Rule says, "Oh, listen to this little tiny speaker," which was the LS35A, and the sound staging and the imaging just blew me away. I never heard anything like that. It changed my life forever, and Yeah.
Of
But
course, the irony is that you don't particularly care for sound staging and imaging these days.
I didn't know. I didn't know. Now it's about, if there's other factors
Yeah.
involved. Wilson, for instance, it's
Mm.
about dynamics. It's about the kind of harmonic kind of resolution, uh, 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 kind of like the cohesiveness of it, the harmonic flow, and it's about micro detail, which could all result in really good sound staging and imaging. And we've heard it many, many, many times. But again, how do you know if it's accurate or not accurate? You just know if you like it or you don't like it.
Yeah. So all of that is to say, be sure about what you don't want and what you would like more of, and that would be a good starting point. Um, yeah, I'll cover that a little bit later. So then, I guess for me, the second thing is music genres, because as much as we all, every time I ask this question, what kind of music do you like? Invariably, I'll get everything. I like everything. And yet, the truth is, most of us have preferences towards certain genres than others. I know I listen to everything, but the truth is, I couldn't listen to EDM for more than 20 minutes at a time, unless it's first thing in the morning, I'm trying to wake up. Then I'll listen to that. Modern rap, forget about it, can't listen to that.
I stopped downloading rap music for some reason. It was just seemed so narrowly constricted, confined.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. So for example, years and years ago, a gentleman who used to work for me passed away, unfortunately. But John loved traditional country. We're talking about, my cat died, my dog got hit by a bus, that kind of country music. And he would, oh my God, he would do
you're gonna get
demos.
some comments about that.
He would do demos with oh gosh, these CDs and LPs that he would bring. And I swear, the moment I could hear that music, I would walk out of the store because I just couldn't take it. But then, interestingly enough, after he passed away, about a year or 2 years later, um, what's her name? Patsy Cline, sorry, uh, um, came on streaming. I was listening to Spotify or something in the background, and I started to tear up because all I could think of was John.
You hadn't heard Patsy Cline before then?
Of course I did, but I wasn't a particular fan of it. And then, but because of John and because of our relationship, it made me tear up. Think about him. So, coming back to the point at hand, musical genre can be a big part of the kind of speakers you might choose. So, if you love, for example, a lot of dance music, rap, reggae, you may want speakers that have a preponderance of bass, maybe to the exclusion of some other things. But if, for example, you care predominantly small quartets, vocals, mid-range and high-frequency type of music, then maybe a small speaker like a Goneri is all you would ever need, because those things are champs.
That's not an inexpensive speaker though.
As an example, like
Okay.
an Electa Amateur 3 or something along those lines.
Minima.
Exactly. Those might be all you need. What do you think, Villet?
Well, I've always gravitated towards music that I thought sounded good. Like, in other words, it got me involved and connected, and I was able to understand it in a way that touched me, almost at a subconscious level, really.
It was like that, "Hey Laura."
Yeah, I mean, that's a piece because obviously there's certain things happening in that song, and it connects to events in my own life that are somewhat similar. That's so sad, but
How can you listen to the same song a million times and still feel sad after these days? It's like I've heard.
well, I'm not like you. So your approach is a little bit different from mine.
Yeah.
You're much more scattered,
Yeah.
and when I listen to the songs on my playlist, there's always things that are so beautiful in it,
Yeah.
and that is a big part of it. So, these songs reveal what the speaker can do, and actually, what it really does is that it always elicits an emotional response
Yeah.
from me, and I definitely crave that. I need that in my life.
Sure.
It's a big reason why music is so important. It's almost like a little time machine, and it transports me to not necessarily the past, but it could transport me to the future, things like that. I mean, there's so many things that are going on in our complicated civilization. Music makes things simple,
Mm.
and I believe that's a really important aspect that you need to maintain in your life.
Yeah. So coming back to the question, music genres, do you think that's important to the choice of speakers?
Um, well, not necessarily, but at the same time, I do believe that as you go up the ladder and have better speaker systems, it will kind of restrict you to what you listen to, because you will want it to sound good. And as long as you think it sounds good, then you'll be okay. But as with many of our clients and our friends who are in this hobby and have this passion, um, when they improve their systems, they actually always restrict what they listen to, in a sense, because it has to have a certain quality that allows the speaker to do and the gear to do the best thing that it can do. So some music just doesn't play well that way. It sounds like it will be irritating to you. It'll be fatiguing, and so you can't listen to EDM for more than 20 minutes. Part of it is because it's just not that well recorded. The stuff that is well recorded, you can listen to for a long time.
If- I think we're going to run out of time, so let's maybe cover that another time. So the next thought I had was, how to choose speakers, size of the room. So for me, that I think we covered that, did we not?
Well,
Recently.
I definitely tell people that there's three parts, and you may agree or disagree with me, but the gear is only one third of it. Another third of it is the room. So how you place the speaker in the room, how you can set it up, is equally as important as the speaker itself. And we've heard this a million times in the store, where if you don't place it correctly, it doesn't sound right.
Right. So the size of the room in particular, if you've got a very small room, don't put big speakers in that small room. They just won't work very
Unless
well.
your name is Chi and you manage to put
Yes.
a pair of
Does he
Maxes in.
watch, by the way?
I don't know if he watches, but he should.
We should do a shout out. She is our favorite Wilson client, in that he's got this 12 by 10 room, and he's got these ginormous Wilson Maxes in there, and he's got huge Macintosh 1.25 KWs, and he says they're not loud enough.
No, they're not loud enough.
He must be a Jamaican.
Oh,
He's
I know.
Chinese,
He's Chinese, but he certainly likes it really loud.
Yeah. So size of the room is very important. You want to make sure that you get the correct size of speakers for the placement in the room and for the size of your room. And of course, the other thing is, with regards to choosing your speakers, is your current electronics. You may not be happy with your speakers or the sound, perhaps because the electronics don't work very well with that speaker. Perfect example would be something like the LRS.
So
Yeah.
I set up our new demo LRS, the one that got damaged.
Tell them about the NAD,
Oh, well,
the little experiment we're
we
going to be
haven't
doing.
tried this yet. I mean, I just bought it yesterday. I bought a 7020, which was one of the original pieces of electronic gear I was looking at when I was going to start my system way back. So I found a really pristine one. I bought it yesterday, and I'm going to bring it to the store and test it out with the LRS. The 7020 and the 3020 were supposed to be stable down to 2 ohms or even 1 ohm. At the time, there was people connecting them up to Apogee speakers. So they should actually match up quite well with the LRS. That amp has like 6 dB headroom. So it's a 20 watt rating. It's capable of 80 watts of output, but high current, relatively high current.
But you have to remember, back then, and this is where specs at the time were.
Well, that's into 8 ohms too.
Specs were very loosey-goosey. That was strictly what they called dynamic headroom. And so again, way back when I was studying engineering, a friend of mine, Kelly, we used to go to church together. Kelly was this unbelievable pianist. Imagine a 19-year-old who had so much talent. He could hear something and play it back beautifully, and with his own interpretations. I mean, as a pianist, it was unbelievable. Anyway, so one day he decided he wanted an audio system, and he knew that I was really crazy about this whole thing, so always reading stereo reviews. So he said, "What do you think I should buy?" So I was telling him about Carver, telling him about, and then I said, the NAD is pretty good too. And he started looking at the NAD, and I said, "Yeah, look, it's got capability of 80 watts or whatever it was, instantaneous current, instantaneous power." And then he asked a very simple question. He says, "But and if all things were equal, wouldn't an 80-watt continuous power amplifier, all things equal, be better than a regularly rated 20-watt per amp amplifier that could, for time to time, for a short period of time, bursts, do 80 watts?" And I was stymied. Something as simple as that. I thought, oh my God, he's right. All things equal, assuming they're all both equally good, wouldn't continuous power be better? And so he's right. Anyway, all of that's to say, I'm very skeptical of the claim that the NAD can do 1 and 2 ohms. But we'll try it and we'll see.
I mean, one of the things that happened back in the past is I had a 3020 at one point, and I bought another one, and I was using it with Mark and Daniel speakers, which are about 82 or 83 dB efficient, and the NAD 3020 drove it perfectly well. It wasn't well damped, so it was kind of really tubby bass, but it could actually drive that speaker and to reasonable levels. And so I suspect that with the LRS, it'll be quite good. Now, the flip side of that, obviously, is that when I set up the LRS again in our front room, we have a Hagel H360 here that we're testing, and that's a $7,000 amp. Okay, and
for sale, by the way, I think, no?
We will have one available, yeah. So I connected it to the LRS, and it was really good, like really good. I got it to the right level where the heads and the imaging in the soundstage weren't too big. They were like life size. And because the LRS stands about almost like 45, 50 inches.
Tall,
so it's actually going to be, the proper size. And so I'm playing music to it. And it sounded full range, totally full range, right down to the bottom and so forth. So this is the issue with the LRS, is that most people just do not put enough amplification on it. And that is an important component of making that your speaker. It has to fit inside the system. If you have less than capable amplifiers with it, it's not going to sound right. So what I found is that a $7,000 amp is what you need to drive this thing properly. I mean,
7 times the cost of the speaker.
Yes.
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus.
So again, the point is you have to make sure that the electronics that you have are a good match with the speakers. In the extreme example with the LRS. And then, as Villip pointed out just now, taste in the sound. Right at the very beginning, he said you have to have an idea of what you like. And if this is your first foray, that'll be more difficult. You'll have to listen to a bunch of stuff to see what you like. But presuming that you already own existing speakers, it'll be easier to figure out what is it that you like about your system and what you don't like about it, and go from there. And then, of course, the important question is budget. It's a question that a lot of times we'll ask a client, and sometimes, you see certain forums. The advice that people give you is that don't ever tell them your budget. Just give them a look. You can play games, but the reality is that if you really want help, you've got to understand you have to have some sort of a budget, and the budget has to be communicated to whoever's trying to help you. Because if you don't, how can they help you? I mean, as we've said in the past in one of our gripes about the industry these days is that things have gotten so expensive. So when people come in and say, I don't have a budget, I want the best. And then you show them what's quite expensive and they go, oh, no, I meant like $500. And this has literally happened to me quite a few times. Not recently, thank God. But so, you have to come up with some sense of a budget and be willing to honestly tell the person that's trying to help you what that budget is.
It also works the other way, because I had a client recently who bought quite a few pieces of Macintosh components from us. And he says to me after the fact, because he first came in to listen to Sonus Faber speakers, and Sonetto speaker, the Sonetto speakers, and he says to me after the fact, after he's bought all this stuff, and what he ended up buying was a pair of Focal Sopra 2s, which he didn't buy from us because we don't sell that. He says, Philip, you should have talked me into. He actually was interested in the Sabrina X, and he never mentioned at any point to me the budget that would allow for something like that. So it works, on the other side as well.
So again, to clarify, I'm not saying that when you set a budget, that is
Hard and fast.
exactly,
Mhm.
but you have to, it's like anything else in your life. You're thinking about a car, you're thinking about a new house or a rental property or just generally rent. You've got to start, you got to start somewhere with an idea of a budget. So it might be, I think, let's start looking at $3,000, for example. But by all means, if you know you can afford a whole lot more, in other words, you have the budget to go higher. Whether or not you choose to spend the budget is beside the point. It's not the issue. Is that maybe you should, while doing the demonstration or listening, say to that person trying to help you, if my budget was higher, what could I get? And then explore that. And of course, the other, most importantly, is be very honest with the salesperson, because one, the salesperson's time is also important. Your time is obviously important, but so is the salesperson's time. And unfortunately or fortunately, we sometimes get people who have nothing else to do, but think that we don't have anything else to do either. And so we're here to, it's like a club. Come on in and we'll play you everything that we have just because you have nothing else to do with your day today. But if you were honestly communicating and say, look, I really want to do this right. This speaker is good, but I'm sort of curious. If I could spend more, and I do have the funds, I can spend more, but can you show me something else? I don't know of any decent salesperson in all the experience, all the years of experience, who would not happily take you through a tour and show you a bunch of things, because of course, one, they want to make the sale, but also two, they really want to help you. Really good salespeople in many respects are crazy that way. We love seeing the joy in our clients' eyes, in their body language. It's just part of our makeup. It's why during the first initial shutdown, the real shutdown, that we all got depressed. We couldn't talk to anybody, right? I mean, we had that first video afterwards where Jay and Philip sat down here, and Jay was like in depression mode. And I actually drove out to see him because he wasn't returning my calls and emails. I had to go see him. He was depressed. I brought him food.
That was a dark time.
Yeah, because for us, that's our makeup. We need to talk to people. So, Philip, what do you think about that as far as the budget is concerned? Do you agree?
I definitely agree, but also my experience has been always that you might come in to listen to one thing, and and every time I've introduced something better, it's, I would say, half the time people are swayed to expand what they would consider, and I find that quite gratifying.
Yeah.
Because here, because they obviously see a value in that, and we're not trying to sell it at the most expensive price and whatnot. We're just trying to create a system for someone that will make them very happy.
Yeah, well said. I guess at this point, how much time do we have? That's it?
All right.
I guess, let's stop and continue it again and finish off the last couple of thoughts. Okay, we're back. Sorry, the cameras that we use for some reason cut us off in 30 minutes. So these are some things to watch out for as a general rule. I remember a lot of the mistakes I used to make with speakers were because I was dazzled by something, hearing something I never heard before in terms of performance. So for example, if you're listening to speakers where they're hooked up through a switcher, In other words, you can push a button A and B, and they're connected that way. And one speaker seems to be so much more dynamic and so much more powerful and so much more loud for the same volume. In other words, they haven't adjusted the volume. Be very careful. One is that it means that the louder speaker is more sensitive. And as an initial impression, something that's louder oftentimes will seem to be better. So do not fall for that. Make sure that the levels are adjusted and you're listening to something roughly equal in terms of volume. Anything that's dazzling and brilliant, again, will immediately capture. I'm just in my mind thinking if I should mention the speaker. I won't. I won't mention
Well,
the brand.
there's a number of brands that do that.
Sure, exactly. For me, early JBLs that I came across had that impression. The titanium tweeters were bright and dazzling, and oh my God, you go into a store back in the 80s and there would be a wall of speakers and through the switch box, and the JBLs always had thumpy bass and high frequencies, what they call the West Coast sound. And you listen to that and you compare it to other speakers that were, in hindsight, perhaps more neutral, more refined. And you would never buy those speakers. You just buy the JBLs. And so just be careful with that, because what might be dazzling initially might turn out to be fatiguing longer term. Villet, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'll echo your comments exactly. And I distinctly remember how tinny those JBLs sounded, the ones with the titanium tweeters.
Coming from a guy who swears by JBL.
I do. But you have to understand that there was a mismatch of electronics then. I mean, certainly if you combine those JBLs with tube gear, it would be much better.
Yeah.
Because the tubes will not have the same type of response in the top end, and it might mitigate some of the brightness in the
and also
tweeter.
The other truth is that the JBL studio monitors were in many ways quite different than a lot of the consumer stuff.
Well, if you pick the 4310, 4311, 4312, they don't have the titanium tweeter, and that's a very, very popular mastering monitor in most of these recording studios. And you probably would still find some of those speakers in the recording studios now, even like so many years after the fact.
Yeah.
But it's just that consumer stuff. And then I think to a certain degree, people were kind of expecting that. They want to hear more and more and more detail.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is by making it brighter and brighter and brighter.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, as audiophiles, a lot of talk, a lot of focus, no pun intended, is based around this whole idea of sound staging, the speakers disappearing, and the more they disappear, the more amazing they sound, or more impressive they sound, I should say. And for a lot of speakers to do that, you just pull the speakers away from any boundary and they'll disappear really, really well. The issue with that is, of course, most of us don't have the luxury of putting the speakers 8 feet from the wall. I was just reading John Atkinson's review yesterday. It came up on my browser. He had done a review on the Sonus Faber Lumina speakers, and I haven't heard those speakers yet, and I'm planning to get them for the store. And so when I saw that, let me read this, because I adore what he does. He not only listens really, he such an experienced listener, but also he measures. So I was reading it with rapt attention, and then he said he couldn't put the speakers where he normally puts them, which is a bit further into the wall. So he had to put them at a certain distance to get the overall bass balance correct. And when he measured it, the front of the baffle was about 6 feet to the wall behind the speakers. 6 feet.
That's a lot.
My first impression, wow. So you're lucky if you've got a dedicated room, you can do that. But, most of us, the speakers need to be, 2 feet, 3 feet from the wall.
Our experience with Sonus Faber equipment or speakers is that they often benefit from the same kind of placement that Wilson prefers.
Yeah.
And so that's how we place them. We don't try and bring them out that far, and that's more of like a real world kind of placement. And certainly my client, the one who bought the Soper 2s, he didn't really. They're like right back, so they're very close to the wall. And with the Macintosh gear that he bought, it sounded fabulous. I mean, it didn't sound bright. and the placement probably gave it a little bit more warmth and bass energy, which kind of like balances it out a bit better. So it's not always that you need to have that kind of placement to get the certain kind of sound staging and imaging. That won't give you any of the other things, which sometimes is actually more important.
Yeah, for me it is. If I could get everything and I had a dedicated room and I could put the speakers, a third into the room as an example, and I wouldn't lose any dynamics and things like that, great. Why not have everything? But in most cases, something gets lost. And why this is important, I brought this up, is because there are certain speakers where you do need to pull the speakers from the wall. So, for example, Magnepan. Um, uh, you do need, when you are listening to the speakers seriously, you do need the speakers at least 5 feet or so from the wall behind the speakers. Now, that's not to say that they have to be there all the time. If they're playing regular, normal background, you can put the speakers closer to the wall. They don't weigh very much. Literally just slide them and put them where you want to put them when you want to sit down for, an hour or 2 hours. But there are other speakers that are much heavier and you can't move them so simply, or omnidirectional speakers. You have to be very careful. You cannot put those speakers close to the walls. They'll sound splashy and everything will just sound terrible. Another thing to be aware of is full deep bass. Again, if you really enjoy full deep bass and you have speakers that are capable of full deep bass, be very careful with room modes, right? So in our store, one of the challenges we have, because we're in an industrial unit, the walls cannot be built the way we'd like to be built. They are mandated by code to use aluminum, studs, and so they're very weak. And ceilings have to be acoustical panels, and so everything's very weak. So when you play something very dynamic with a lot of bass, the rooms will start shaking. So you got to be careful that your speakers are going to work in your room. Philip, any thoughts?
So I have a client in the States, and he was mentioning to me he went to a store to listen to some speakers and some electronics. I won't mention what it is. It's all the same stuff that we sell. But he had a problem in the store because the store is built like our store, which means that the walls are thin and the rooms will vibrate and resonate in certain frequencies depending on the setup, right? And we often, when you listen, like in this room proper, which is actually a pretty good sounding room, at certain frequencies, at certain levels, the walls will start shaking.
Oh, no doubt.
So it's very hard to get a sense of what it could do in your house. Obviously, it reacts differently. But the main tonality of the speaker won't really change that much. So you will be able to hear a lot of the things that you should be able to hear at home. It's just that in a lot of brick and mortar stores that are set up like we are, it can be a little bit difficult. You have to disregard some of what you're hearing.
Well, as I always say to clients, most of the feedback tends to be really good, right? Clients go, "Wow, that sounds amazing."
Yeah.
And I always point out, this is a terrible room. So if it sounds amazing in this terrible room, imagine what it'll sound like in your room. And it's not, this is not platitude. This actually is real. Maybe one of these days, as a B-roll, we'll go near the wall and we'll just slightly tap on it, and Jerry can record the sound, the resonance. It's
So we've done a lot to treat this room. I mean, it looks simple, but there's a lot of treatment here. And one of the easy ways to tell is just do the clap test. If you do the clap, like if you listen to my voice, there's not that much echo that's happening. It's fairly direct. It's pretty clear. So that's actually an easy way to tell if your room is decent. If you've done enough to make the room so that it will sound good with audio gear.
Okay, we've gone on long enough. As usual,
long time.
We're very, very long-winded, and maybe part of it is because we haven't done one in so long. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this, please subscribe, turn on the notifications, thumbs up, and share the videos. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next time. Adrian from Audio Excellence Canada, Philip, and Jerry behind the camera. Bye-bye.